everybody, happy Fangirl Friday. This is Anita Castellar, and welcome to our Friday edition of Fangirl Friday Live. If you were not around for Monday's transmission, which was all about Star Wars Day and fandoms, I'm here to tell you that it was great. It was basically a soft launch for us. Get the kinks out. And we're now on our regularly scheduled day, so it is Fridays. We will try to keep this regularly scheduled time as well for 1 p.m. Eastern, because we do know that you want to plan your whole life around our transmission. So we want to keep this regular. So again, Fridays around 1 p.m. Eastern. If you don't know, my name again is Anita Castellar. I am the head of FanGirl Consulting and Brand Management. We are a small boutique licensing agency. We also do lots of other things, marketing and consulting, and helping just basically be helpful within the fan community and also within the business community of licensing, toy industry. Lots of history there, lots of also passion, because we are built of a team of fangirls and executive fanboys. So what we wanted to do was bring some fun, of course, on a Friday afternoon, but also some education to our community at large. And if you have not ever touched anything about licensing or toys or anything in the professional side of the business except for purchasing them, we wanted to also kind of share some of that basic knowledge as well. Since we're all socially distanced, this is our version of bringing you some content. Hopefully, again, we'll have some entertaining conversations with some of our friends, colleagues, family members even throughout this time. And we'll also hopefully learn something together. So please feel free to drop a share, drop a like, drop a comment or a question. And we're happy to answer them now or even later if you wanted to just DM us and don't want to be called out live. So with that said, on Monday we talked a lot about fandoms. What does that mean? Generational aspect, introducing it from one generation to the next, but then also what does licensing and the merchandise mean to the fans themselves? And we had a really good conversation around how that's like an initial handshake, right? Or a wink to somebody on the bus system or something. If you happen to be, taking the bus or public transportation, walking down the street, someone stops you and says, "Hey, I really like that shirt," or "Hey, I really like that hat." There's a ton of work that actually goes behind the scenes integrating that t-shirt or that hat or the action figure or the Funko Pop that you happen to buy. All the things that, you kind of see behind me, really takes a lot of energy and effort and a really large community of people to get that done. And that's what I'm hoping to actually also bring to the light and shine some light on some of those people, shine some light on their talent, the efforts, the energies behind all of that. And then, of course, back to the business aspect, because we are a business, right? And we are a company. So let's bring in someone who actually can speak to that now. I'm going to invite my friend here, excuse me, and we will. And while we're waiting for that, thank you everyone for taking some time out. I see lots of people coming in to share their time with us. Frazier, if you're there waiting for you to join, we would love to see you. Anybody right now actually who has a question, just a reminder, if you have a question or comment, please feel free to include that in the comment section. So I think we're still waiting for Frazier to join us, but other than that, well, we're gonna keep waiting. But in the meantime, these are the things that happen when you go live, right? You live and you learn, and we share our goofs and our funs with you. So how about you tap that button right there where it says exit, and a little bit of history about myself, and I think we actually see him in there somewhere, requests. So the way, sorry. The company is actually built off of a lot of history. So I've actually had the really good fortune of working within the industry. My history started at the Walt Disney Parks. I went on to Hasbro, worked at the Master Toy License there on Star Wars, and then joined Lucasfilm. Had the really good fortune to work at Lucasfilm, and always basically been attached to the fans. And someone else who's attached to the fans has just joined us. Hello.
Hey there, how are you?
We had a little bit of a glitch, but we're back on track. My good friend, John Frazier from the Coop. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the crowds?
As you said, yeah, thank you. My name is John Frazier. I go by Frage on the internets. I'm the VP of Licensing and Marketing over at Crowded Coop, aka the Coop. I've been doing this since 2005 or six ish. So
We don't
I'm
want to date ourselves, not too much.
yeah, yeah.
But so how did you come to work with the Coop? Like what, I guess, you know what, let's stop there. Go back even further into your memory banks and tell us a little bit more about like how were you always a fan of things, right? In particular, like if it's fantasy or anime or anything like that. Were you ever a kid growing up, dreaming about these types of things?
Yeah, I think my earliest memory of fandom is when I was about 4 years old, and I was literally sitting on my father's lap watching Star Trek, the original series, on a tiny little color TV in my living room. And I remember the episode, it
You
was
were, you
Tomorrow Was Yesterday.
you were
Hmm?
lucky to get color.
Yeah, yeah. It was before color was invented, right? No, so yeah, that was my first foray into it, and I remember watching it going, wow, this is amazing. And luckily Star Trek was on syndication, so every Saturday night on Channel 5 we would sit down and eat dinner and watch Star Trek. It was amazing.
Yeah. So was that always like your core fandom, or were there other things that you enjoyed?
Oh, sure. I mean, I don't think you and I would be friends if I wasn't a Star Wars fan too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Um, but yeah, I remember many summers when I would be hanging out with my friends and we would be speculating it because I remember when The Empire Strikes Back had come out and we were wondering about what Return of the Jedi was going to be like. We were speculating about like, what if Boba Fett was really Luke's father? You know, we came up with this whole headcanon over the obfuscation of Boba Fett being Luke's father instead of Darth
oh
Vader.
wow.
It was kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
That's pretty neat. I mean, I love the fact that fandoms not only help us escape, but they also help us to be inspired, right? Like they inspire a lot of creative thinking, a lot of to just take us in down different paths. Like when you start to break down whatever fandom you enjoy, there's a lot of layers there. There's either storytelling or there's an emotional hook or, there's a character that you actually can associate with. A lot of people tend to kind of latch on their emotional or project, their own personality or something like that on characters. So I feel like it's really interesting in that way. And for me, I've been able to be fortunate to have it kind of help guide my career path. And, kind of make influence a little bit of how I do my work. So do you find that that's similar for you as well?
But yeah, not just and not just a peripheral way. I mean, yes, directly, my fandom has directly influenced my sourcing or my creativity in developing product, and even my experience with that fandom
Hmm.
changes how I source and changes the kind of things that I kind of create. But yeah, you're like you said, the creativity side of it. When I was trying to come up with alternative versions of the story, just sort of exercise my creativity. I remember in the eighth grade, my English teacher was telling me, okay, stop. Before there was a term for it, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but she said, stop writing fanfic for your writing
Oh,
assignments. I kept
wow.
writing Star Trek fanfic
Oh, wow.
before it was called fanfic. So yeah, she
That's
said, try
crazy.
something else.
Oh, yeah, I guess in one way though, right, we can tend to get like pigeonholed into something and just stick with that a little bit.
They
It's
say,
different.
write what you know.
Yeah, that's true. So when you say it directly affects what you do, how about you tell us about what you do, right? Tell us what you do. Tell us who the Coop is. What do they do? Tell us a little bit about
So
that.
the Coop is we are historically an OEM manufacturer based out of the Pacific Northwest in Monroe, Washington.
Teacher,
Am I
what is OEM?
I know I was going to get to that. I'm going to like put a dollar in the acronym jar. Uh, OEM it stands for Original Equipment Manufacturer, and it basically means um, I want to make this mug. I need to find a mug manufacturer to make it for me. The Coop is that manufacturer, not in this case, but if I'm GameStop and I say I need a statue that's this big and is of this character from this video game, Coop, can you make it for me? Yes, we'll make it for you.
Mhm.
So historically, we've always made product for other people, you know, for Target or for Walmart or for GameStop or for Hot Topic or whatever. And lately, we've kind of realized it's great to do that, and it's good business, but we kind of want to make that connection directly to the customer instead. We feel like we can make a better product that is more in line with what they want than, and I don't want to like step on any toes here, but more than some executive who needs to make margin, you know, needs to make a certain amount of profit on a particular product, you know. So I can make a product that's better focused to the needs specifically of the end consumer, and that's a lot more fun, a lot more interesting to me.
Right. So just so that we give a little context then on how things come to market for the consumers, right? For the fans. You mentioned product that goes to GameStop. So there's a couple of different ways. You can either manufacture it yourself, like you were saying, right? An OEM company. So I create it, I design it, I sell it into a GameStop. They then resell it to the fans.
Right.
There's also a different role, which is what I used to fulfill when I worked at Lucasfilm. I was on the licensing team. So then I wasn't manufacturing anything, right? But I was finding people, manufacturers such as yourselves, and then I would grant to them a license on behalf of the company. We would work out kind of what the products would be and some parameters around financials and such. Because there are fees associated, right, with taking a license. And then the manufacturer would then be on their way to design, develop with our input on the brand side and how the products would happen. And then the same end process would happen. That manufacturer would then go to a GameStop or to another retailer and then sell that in, right? So those are a couple of different points I just wanted to clarify with some people who may or may not know how products actually get to market.
Yeah, a couple of different paths to the same end result. Sure.
Exactly. So why is fandom and why are particular fandoms, really important to the Coop?
So the thing about fandoms, and you touched on this in the very beginning, there's a certain emotional connection that a fan can have with an IP, with an intellectual property like Star Trek or Firefly or Star Wars. You want to live in that world. You want to be the captain of the starship, you know. So you try and project yourself into that role, and so you want to surround yourself with things that make you feel like you're in that universe. So the cosplayers, they want to be Malcolm Reynolds, or they want to be I'm flaking on the character's name from Mass Effect. But anyway, they want to be that person, that they want to be in that role. So we give them the means to make them feel like they're part of that. And when you make that emotional connection, it means that if you've got a strange, crazy idea for a product that may not necessarily play well in a retail space, that one customer or that small handful of customers will really connect with that product. And when they do that and they buy it and they love it, they're yours for life. They're your best friends. They're loyal and they keep coming back. And that's the kind of customer I want, someone who's engaged and excited and a return customer.
How do we keep the fans engaged? Like, there's content that keeps people engaged. That's a whole different topic. And hopefully, in a future transmission, we can do one of those types of things. Let's talk about the content itself and how it's created and how that translates back to the licensing. But how do we keep, on the business side, the fans engaged?
It's a tough question, and it's really difficult. It's really difficult to execute when you're in a large company corporate mindset, because you tend to flatten your engagement with your customers. You don't really reach out and have personality especially in your social media. And social media, I've found lately, you really have to speak to your customers like you're a human being and they're a human being, and you're making that connection. If you start communicating with them in a way that seems inauthentic, or again, for lack of a better term, it's sort of a corporate speak, vanilla, bland kind of way, they read that, they feel that, they see that, and they may come across, or they may have a feeling of a decent customer experience, but they want a really personal one, I
Right.
think.
I
So
think
yeah.
that comes through in licensing as well, though, because my philosophy has always been that, licensing is a dialogue, right?
Mm,
It's a conversation with the fans.
yeah.
And it's also an opportunity to engage them, right? So you have your mug or you have this, you're wearing a Dragon Ball t-shirt today or what have you, right? So it's like, how do you authentically reach out to them, give them a product that we want to sell, obviously, but we want them to be engaged in the fandom through that means,
Hmm.
right? So they engage in the fandom through the content itself, whether it's a book, a comic book, a show, a movie, whatever, right? And then, we're extending the storytelling. We should be extending the
Hmm.
storytelling through the licensing piece. And then as licensors, finding those manufacturers who will mirror that, right? Who will take that and then bring that to that idea and that to fruition, right? Like that goal of having that conversation, having the storytelling extended, having the product be an extension of something that you see and engage with. And then, in the end, it becomes a tool. It becomes a moment in time for the fans to be able to take that thing, that mug, that t-shirt, whatever, and express themselves with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's play.
So,
It's
yeah,
adult play. I am 50 years old and I still play with my toys. I still have all kinds of things, and I still play with them because you just never stop being an adult. Age is just a number. So yeah,
yeah.
as a licensor, you encourage your fans to play with your IP.
Mm-hmm.
Have fun
Right.
with it. Live in it. World, this is a world that we've created for you. Enjoy it.
Right. Right. So how do we react though when the fans don't like what we put out? That's tough, right? I mean, that's hard as anyone who has had to manage an IP or help manage an IP like licensees do, because they help to a
Mm,
certain degree. Then when we put something out that the fans don't like and they backlash and tell us, yikes, right? That's scary
yeah.
because we want to put out something that's great all the time.
Yeah, there are a couple of different approaches I think you can take. You can either say, look, this I hate to say it, I'm thinking about like what the fans have been, how the fans have reacted to Star Trek Discovery and
Mhm.
Picard. There is a subset of fans that are just not into it. They are not into it and they're vocal about it. But at the same time, there's a lot of fans who are totally into it and they love it. And you have to as a licensor, you have to admit you're not going to please everybody first and foremost. You're not going to please everybody, but there are going to be times when you're going to please nobody. And yeah, you're going to have to adjust. You're going to have to retcon a little bit. And you see that sometimes with some IPs where they'll say, "Oh yeah, we just don't talk about that anymore."
It's a
And
non-existent.
yeah, in situations like that, you take your lumps and you try and move on because there's going to be. And think about it this way: if the fans are not liking something, it's because they loved what you put out previously so much
Mm,
that they want more of that. And that's good. That's actually a good data point. So learn from that and say, okay, misstep, let's move on.
right. What's a really good way to be able to get feedback from the fans besides like social media or whatnot? Would you say like fan conventions would definitely be, I've always found it interesting to go there and see them face to face. It's very
Hmm.
scary sometimes, because they're very vocal, right? They're passionate about whatever their fandom is. And they
Yeah,
want to make sure though also that you are authentic, that you're knowledgeable about your own IP, because there are some people who are not knowledgeable about their own IP,
it's
right?
true.
Um, that's the difference between a deal maker and a brand builder, right?
Mm.
Because you have to be really in-depth knowledge about your own IP, and then you can manage it properly. That's my opinion.
No, yeah.
But when you go to fan conventions and are with them face to face, like that's direct feedback.
Yeah, totally. Fan conventions are amazing. This year is going to be an aberration because as all my regular conventions are canceled or postponed till next year. And that's
Mhm.
that's hard to take. And I'm really hoping somebody steps up and creates a really solid virtual con. I'm waiting for that. I know there's somebody out there, hopefully somebody watching out there is going to organize something like that because that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
But
there are a few that are popping up though.
Yeah, there are a couple, and I've seen a couple pop up where there were a few dozen folks on a Discord channel, and but I want to see something really at a huge scale, something at a San Diego Comic-Con scale.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I'm waiting for that. But yeah, I love fan conventions, and ever since I was in this business, I had to attend fan conventions not as a fan, which is hard. You have to watch it, you have to go there and pay attention to the pulse of the people and what they're into, and how big was the Lucas booth versus the CBS booth. Not that it's a contest, although it is. But
Never is
no,
it.
I'm kidding. No, seriously.
But that's
It's good.
actually that's a good point though, because I'll park and let that for a second, but that's actually part of the business as well. So go ahead.
Yeah, so I do use fan engagement and the quantity of fan engagement with helping me understand, okay, that IP is really hot and it wasn't on my radar, so I need to pay attention to that. I did that a few years back when at my previous gig at ThinkGeek, where I was like, I really need to know how big One Punch is. And
Hmm.
I only knew of it peripherally, and then I went and I saw so many Saitamas
Hmm.
at San Diego Comic-Con. I'm like, okay, yeah, I need to invest in this one because this is
That's
bigger than I thought it was,
yeah.
So from a merchandise perspective, conventions are hugely beneficial. Not just attending it and then watching it from the edges, but also attending it and working booths and communicating with those customers. Again, that's a great conduit for contacting the customers directly and seeing what they're into and feeling their enthusiasm. And that enthusiasm feeds back to you because
Mhm.
when you see how excited they are, it energizes you and you work twice as hard.
Right. So speaking of conduits and communication, I think we actually have a question or a comment.
I think he actually just answered
Oh.
this question, but it was from Greenhouse Soul, and it was, do you gauge fandom by the number of fans sporting your stuff at events? So I think that really just right away answered it right there.
Yeah. So, we don't, when we say gauge, right, we don't want to gauge whether it's good or bad. That's for the fans to gauge.
Mhm.
What we gauge is really like, how well are we doing our job? I would say that's my opinion in that answer, is that how well are we doing our job in promoting the fandom and promoting the property, and then giving the fans the proper things that they're looking for to actually engage with that.
Yeah. I use, uh, there's a couple of different things that I think about when I'm looking at engagement at conventions, and size is one of them, but it's not the only thing. Uh, so as an example, if I were to look at Firefly, that old Fox IP, um, it's a fairly narrow set of fans, but their engagement is incredibly deep. They're so engaged. I will sell twice as many Firefly products as I would Star Trek products, and Star Trek would ostensibly be a much larger
Yeah.
a collection of fans, but they're not as engaged. I'm not saying they're not engaged, but they're not as deeply,
Like the
passionately
population
engaged.
size is bigger, but
Yeah,
the level of engagement per person is way deeper on like a
right.
fire.
Right, right. And
Mhm.
so that's harder to gauge just by looking at the size of the crowd. You have to look how much they're into it, how much they're living that IP, one versus the other. And so I can invest if I was buying into a license. A Firefly license might be cheaper than a Star Trek license, but I'll make the same amount of money for this amount of royalty than I would here. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a funny business.
Well, people vote with their wallets too, right? Like
Hmm.
they show up or they don't show up for a party that we throw at retail, and you'll know right away. You
Yeah,
know,
it's true.
stuff is either going to be moving, the inventory is either going to be moving because people are liking what you're doing and they're going to, again, vote with their wallet, or they're not going to like what you're doing and the stuff will sit there. And, in industry, we call those peg warmers, and we don't like those.
Hmm.
We
Yeah.
don't like peg warmers. There's been a few action figures I've worked on in the past, which were peg warmers, and that was unfortunate.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Yes, this one is from Mark Edwards. What are the most common licensing mistakes brands make when selling to their fans?
what are some of the most common licensing mistakes brands make?
I
Being
don't know.
inauthentic, I think, is a big one.
Yeah.
Meaning, and I'll being in a position where, each of us that is in the industry, or whenever you have a job and you work for somebody else, you have to fulfill certain requirements, right? And in the industry, it's a licensing industry, it's a revenue generating industry. So falling into the trap of picking a really lucrative deal, licensing deal from the licensor's perspective, versus picking a deal that is maybe not going to make you as much money, but the product would be much better, right? I think sometimes we, having had managed brands in the past and stuff, like fall into that trap sometimes where, wow, this makes my dollars for the year, right? Like or my budget or whatever the goal I'm looking to fulfill, but this product over here will be more limited in distribution or more limited in the license, but it's way cooler.
Yeah.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm agreeing with my buddy Mike, who's talking about logo slapping. That was exactly going to be my thing. Whereas, here's a good example. This T-shirt that I'm wearing, I'm gonna have to stand a little bit so you can see it. This T-shirt that I'm wearing is actually it's a licensed shirt for an old IP, the movie Real Genius with Val Kilmer in it. This is a secret handshake because this is the university that he went to, and nobody but the super fans would notice it and get it. If I just had a Real Genius and a picture of Val Kilmer with his dealy bobbers on, yeah, okay, yeah, cool. That'll speak to the fan a little bit, but this one, the super fan, they'll get this. If they saw both of those shirts on the shelf, they'd rather have this one.
Yeah.
The Mandalorian, if you saw a T-shirt that was a black T-shirt just said the Mandalorian on it, yeah, that'd probably sell a bunch. But if you had the Mudhorn signet, just silver on black, that'd be choice. That'd be so much better.
Anybody from Lucasfilm is watching, that's a freebie for you.
Yeah, go for it. I don't have that license, so yeah, knock yourself out.
No,
By the way, I would buy that shirt, so yeah, make it.
Yes, I would as well, especially if it was embroidered. But the other piece is also like if you saturate the market, right? Like, I mean, sometimes too much of a good thing is just too much of a good thing.
Yeah. Our industry is facing that to a certain degree. There is a little bit of fatigue in some styles of product, and we're seeing that played out. And I think other businesses are going to take advantage of that as it happens. But yeah, subtle products can speak louder to a super fan, is what Girl November is saying. Yeah, there are a lot of products out there where there's a style that's overplayed. Let's look at the child. Talking about the Mandalorian again. When we talk about the Baby Yoda, the child, everyone was freaking out at the very beginning because there was no product for it, and they thought, huge missed opportunity, guys, huge. But then you watch, and then the child went through several stages of fandom. There was at first the curiosity, then there was the hype, and then there was the super hype, and then there were the memes, and then there was burnout. And it went that whole life cycle of fandom for the child went through faster than product development normally happens. Like product development,
we're in burnout phase already.
I think for now, because there isn't a season 2 yet. When season 2 does come out, they'll begin to I think rehype it, and it could restart. But if you were to come out with a child product now, people would look at it on the shelf and go, yeah, and then move on.
Interesting. If anybody's developing product for the child, it'd be interesting to drop a comment on.
They'll probably tell me I'm completely wrong, but
it's interesting to see. Yeah.
I like to bet on the underdogs, and I wanted the child to be really, really cool. And I have friends who developed the child products, and they rolled it out faster than anybody, and they didn't sell any.
Oh.
So it's like, okay, I think people were already over it.
I want to talk about timing, but we have another question to get to.
All right, so this one is from Rexisms. Do you see that power in the subtle across categories, like for instance, toys?
Do we feel the power of subtle merchandises? Say that again.
Do you see that power in the subtle across categories, like for instance, toys?
Okay. I think it's different. Well, this goes to a different topic as well, which is you have to have something for every spectrum fan, right? Like everyone on the spectrum of fandom needs to have something. And whether you're at the young age range or the young at heart, older age range, you know, your ability to engage in that fandom is different, right? And what we give you for that level should be different. And so it depends if you're talking about toys collectors for adults, or you're talking about toys like straight, you know, true toys for kids aged 6 to 11 or preschool or whatever. So I think the tool needs to look different for each person, for each age grade. And it, you know, what that is different. So like if you're a kid, there's also a lot of things that we talk about, like aspirational versus inspirational, right? Those are play patterns, or there's some things, there's psychology behind how you put the toy together. But if you're a child and you get said we're talking about toys like that, then really the toy should be a tool for the child to recreate in imagination, some imagination play, recreate what they see on the screen, project their own, you know, storytelling onto the characters as well sometimes. So that's a different type of toy and need than, you know, what you give for an adult, you know, fan, I would say.
Yeah, I think that you're right that the toys are a different way of thinking about product. You're certainly going to sell more Darth Vader action figures than you would IG-88 action figures. But when I was a kid and you had, if somebody you knew had an IG-88, you would lose your mind.
Yeah.
That was such an aspirational product to have, and it was bragging rights when you got to show it off to your friends. That was huge. Yeah, you
Right.
might sell a tenth of them, but again, that fan engagement is hard to measure, but it is there and it's real. So you got to make sure that you offer both when you're talking about toys and you're talking about licensed toys, I think.
And we also have to make sure that we're getting through the gatekeepers, right, with toys.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of times the caregivers, I say caregivers now because anyone's raising a child, right? So those are the folks that have to feel comfortable with the product that you're putting out. And if it's way above the kid's head, they might not buy it. If the value's not there and they don't want to spend the money, they're not going to buy it. You know, those are all the different layers of thought processes that people are actually, when they're staring at your box on the shelf, those are all the things that are going through their brain. You know, will my child like it? Will this person, you know, enjoy it for a long time? Is there a lot of wear in it? Is this worth the investment of money? Is it educational versus throwaway? Like all these things, probably what, 10 seconds worth, but it's all like, you know, all running through the brain at that time. So, you know, those levels of tools and engagements are going to be way different, you know, for each person. So, okay, so are there any other? Okay, we're moving on to our own conversation pieces. So there are some other things that I wanted to talk about as well, which was like the booth size we had mentioned at the fan conventions, and going there, you know, to look at everybody and not only go as a fan. Those have to come at the after hours, I guess, for us, you know, that go work. But what are some of the other things that you look at when you're working at a fan convention that are important?
Well, it's funny. I'll tell you a funny story. I was working the ThinkGeek booth a bunch of years ago, and at the time we were offering a set of comic books that were special issues that were exclusive to ThinkGeek, and we were selling them as sets, and we ran out. We still had a couple left that, you know, we reserved for emergencies and that sort of thing. And but we had pretty much run out, and we had one gentleman walk up to our booth and speak to a coworker of mine, a mutual friend of ours actually, and said, you know, hey, I understand you have some of these comic books. Can I get one? And he looked at him and said, no, I'm sorry, we're out. And the guy was like, okay, and then slowly walked away. And then it wasn't me, but somebody grabbed him. Somebody grabbed and brought him back to the booth, and then turned to our friend and said, do you know who that is? That was Brent Spiner. Data from Star Trek, and
Oh no.
you told him no to his face, and he's like, oh my God, I did. Oh my God, and ran off and grabbed a comic and handed it to him and apologized profusely, and everybody laughed at it later. But when you say that, you have to have those moments of fandom after hours, not always. Sometimes the convention comes to you, even if you're
Yeah.
working the booth.
No, it's true. I'll tell you, I had a recent fandom moment where I was actually at Toy Fair in New York in February, and I just lost my stuff. And I don't normally, I've been doing this for a while, right? But I'm a big wrestling fan. I like wrestling and stuff besides all the other stuff I do. And there was this, the AEW. I was at the Jazzwares booth. The AEW team was there, and some of the guys come in, and the Young Bucks show up, and I was literally talking to somebody, and I was like, I have to go. I'm sorry, and I just left.
You're not important right now.
Yeah, I was like, sorry, I gotta get my picture taken with the Young Bucks. So, I did apologize later, but we have those moments as well. But when we're working, a lot of the things, like you were even mentioning the size of the booth, like for us when we're in the industry, to us that means level of investment, right? That means how much is the studio behind this property that they're willing to put a lot of money up to support it. The engagement of, the talent, like, do you bring the talent in? Do you not bring the talent in? All those kinds of things, giveaways, little subtle things like that are cues to the other people in the industry about how much your company is, investing in whatever the property is, right? We're making a big bet. We're making a so-so bet. If you make a lot of hype on social media and then people show up at your fan booth and it's like, a 10 by 10, maybe not so much fan bet, right? Like you start to question, those types of things. And so that's a subtle cue. A lot of you mentioned the Saitamas from One Punch Man, right? Like when we go, we also look at trends around who's cosplaying what and how many of them are there. Because if there's no product for it, we also do know that the fans are very creative and they will make it themselves, right? So either they're making their own costumes or they're just, cosplaying because they really enjoy it and they're really good at it, because some of these costumes are incredible.
Yeah.
Shout out to all of my cosplayer friends who hopefully are joining. But a lot of the times you see those trends over and over and over again. Who's the top character? Who's the major studio? Who's the, what's the property that everybody's buzzing about when you get there? And for us that have had to develop or license product, those are big indicators. We're not comp shopping at, whatever the mall stores are. We're comp shopping at the fan convention because that informs back to the business of the fandom. And then, like people like you have to go back and select stuff, right? Like you have to make choices.
And you can make not even atomic choices. You can make macro choices where there was one San Diego Comic-Con that I went to where I was sort of making a mental count of the number of fandom t-shirts. There's plenty of cosplayers out there, but there are also just people wearing street clothes, and they're often trying to put on at least something to show that they're a fan of some IP. And I remember that year, the number one t-shirt, licensed t-shirt that I saw was this beautiful red t-shirt that was a blueprint of the Millennium Falcon. And I saw this one everywhere. And then I was like, wow, that is a great shirt. And everyone seems to be wearing it. And come to find out, it was a Target exclusive.
Yeah.
And at the time, again, I was at Think Geek, and I thought, why is anybody buying t-shirts from me when they could just go to Target and buy it for $10? And that's when I started making a plan, and we never did implement it, but I was making a plan to migrate our t-shirt business to a print on demand, because we were spending so much money on warehouse space and blanks and printing, and we would have to print we have to print several hundred shirts in a single style, and that was a lot of money to invest in product that was moving a few dozen pieces a week.
Right.
So it wasn't a big business, and it was costing us more than we were making on it, and we were constantly losing market share to big box retail, who were doing a great job at it, So it's like, why why am I trying to compete against that? Why don't I just sort of pivot and focus on the things that I am really good at and difficult to recreate? So yeah, you can learn a lot, not just about individual IPs, but your entire company's direction if you pay attention.
So you touched on two trends in the business that are happening kind of as we speak. Number one is the mainstreaming of pop culture or fandom, right? And then the second piece is the print on demand technology and how that has been affecting the industry. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Print on demand is fascinating to me because there are several different aspects of that business that are really unique and interesting, and some not necessarily licensor friendly. But print on demand, it enables a couple of different things. You can take like the Redbubble approach, where you do something that's it's your own artwork, but it is definitely inspired by someone else's intellectual property, and you sell it until the licensor says, hey, that's our IP, you need to stop. And we go, okay, no, sorry, our bad, we're done. And
well, Redbubble has also done a really good job of getting their hands around that, right? Where they're now starting to work with official licensor studios or what have you, and kind of help the fan community also create something that's really great and we call on brand, right? So
yeah, it's amazing what they're able to accomplish. But the early days of print on demand, there was a lot of infringing product that as soon as the C&D letter showed up, they stopped and said, okay, we're moving on to the next thing, you know, or a 24-hour shirt, which back in the day when we had to decide in advance, we were going to print 350 of these shirts. Oh, we can't sell it anymore? All right, well, what do I do with this now? You know, so print on demand enables a quick in, quick out. And if, especially in this day and age of memes that flash and then are gone, you can exploit that, have a product for sale, and as soon as no one's interested, you pull out and you haven't invested a lot of money into that product, whether it's a mug or a shirt or a bumper sticker. All of that can be done overnight.
Well, also
turned on and then turned off.
Yeah. Like what we were talking about before, like timing, you know, you're saying the child, the example there, where, you know, it's all about kind of capitalizing, you know, the right price, the right product at the right time for when the fans want it, you know, and if you want it today, great. And if you don't want it tomorrow, we pull it and it's just a digital image. But we make it available, you know, from print on demand or, you know, other, when fans want it. So I think we might have a question or a comment. I'm not, Nikki, is there a question or a comment that's in there? I'm sorry, we'll get to it, I'm sure. Maybe something about Etsy, I think it's in there somewhere. But you know, so that's a harder part where, you know, we're combating those creator folks from like a Etsy or something, but then also trying to give good quality product. But then also, you know, everyone has to make sure that the brand is protected. So, you know, it's all the balancing act between like what's right for the brand, what's right for the fans, you know, the financials involved, the creativity involved, because you also want to make sure that the fans still want to express their creative, you know, juices with your fandom.
Yeah, and you don't want to upset those fans. I mean, at ThinkGeek many years ago, we did have the license to make the knitted Jane hat.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a whole kerfuffle because Fox, not ThinkGeek, but Fox sent a C&D to the Etsy shop owners who were making their own hats. And the Etsy shop, and we had no idea that they were doing it. And then the Etsy shop owners came down on us because they were like, you know, you're stealing money from my wallet. I'm like, what? No, I'm not. It's them, you know?
Yeah.
So it's, on the one hand, you know, I get it. It is your IP, and you did sign an agreement with an exclusive agreement with this entity, and so you're within your rights, but maybe try a different way to engage with the fans, you know. There are a couple of IPs where I've had this frank conversation with brand managers of very large sci-fi IPs, and they've said, yeah, we're aware of it, but we let them go, not because we're not necessarily, I mean, yeah, we would love to make that product, but I don't want to anger the fans. The fans love us, and I don't want them to not love us for any reason.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, you know, it's hard when our business is dependent upon that, right? And dependent upon that engagement or that love from them, you know, on that. So, you know, there's that. It's hard sometimes, but it's a
Yeah.
really good
Yeah.
tool. Print on demand is a really good tool though for when, you have to kind of fill that gap, fill that need
Mm.
that the folks are requesting, and you have to do it quickly, so you can pull it up and down. So we do have a question.
So this was a comment kind of
Oh,
related to the print on demand and Etsy. So this is from Girl November. She says, I think this happens too with Etsy, where patterns or items will show up to fill the void when industry hasn't quite caught up with the hype around something new.
yeah, exactly. And I think
That's
that's
true.
also on the side of the managers or licensors or whoever is managing the business, where they have to keep their finger on the pulse of the fans. And sometimes we're not quick on the draw, and sometimes we're too quick on the draw. It's hard to judge that, but it's definitely becoming a new and more mainstream tool for a lot of brands to use to kind of have that first phase of print on demand. And sometimes it's a good way to judge too, like how are fans engaging with your product or your brand. If there's a lot of print on demand requests or purchases, that shows that there's probably an opportunity for more business to be done.
Right.
But if you're only buying one or two of this print on demand piece, then that's probably a leveling off there of the engagement on that brand.
But it's also a way for you to develop that subtle product that will speak very, very strongly to that super fan.
Right.
If this shirt was available print on demand, you might not have sold but a couple of dozen, but those couple of dozen customers would be so happy.
Right. Right. And that's going back to giving all of the spectrum of fans what they want,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We have another one.
But
So this one's from Yenses0916. Do cons allow co-branding? I know when we attend any special event with my girls always want at least one tee that speaks to the event and the PI they love. We love the $12.99 tees from Target, but we must have a tee from a con as our souvenir.
I think it depends on the con and it depends on the brand. That's
yeah,
a short answer, like having been involved in Star Wars Celebration, for example, that's a perfect kind of example of how you can get the event tee, the logo from the event, and your brand in, to kind of coincide. But that's also done in-house by the Lucasfilm team with help from ReedPop and all of that. But if you're a fan convention and you do want to have a co-branded tee, it's really up to the fan convention to reach out to the brand owner to say, hey, work with me on this idea. So yes, it's possible. Does it happen properly? Probably not so much overall.
yeah. The nature of the business being so many contracts and approvals and the time it takes for all those approvals, sometimes it's not practical to do it above board. And when you're a con owner and you want to have a commemorative shirt, you want to make friends with those brands because if you may be legally within your rights to do a mashup or a parody or something like that, but you may not get invited back. If you start making enemies that way, you might not be making too many friends. So yeah, you want to stay above board as much as possible, but sometimes it's not practical.
Yeah, we always want to make sure we have allies, not obstacles.
Right.
In everything we do, by the way, life lesson. What about the mainstreaming though, like into mass market that we've been seeing of pop culture? It's no longer, that stigma of, the people who live in people's basements, kind of being the basis of the fandom. Like, how do you feel about that, and what do you see it going?
Yeah, it was an interesting trend to see. I mean, when I was a kid and I was a fan, I was certainly stigmatized for how much I loved Star Trek and Star Wars and anime and the like. So I did not wear that love on my sleeve like I do now, like I literally do now. So I had to. So when I talk about subtlety at the beginning of this video call, it stemmed from a need to show my fandom, but still hide it from the people who might stigmatize me for being a fan. So I wouldn't wear a t-shirt that said Star Trek on it, but I might have, like a friend of mine makes a Vasquez Rocks t-shirt that looks like a concert tee, but the Star Trek fan would know, oh yeah, that's a reference to the cage, or not the cage, the arena in Star Trek, the original series. So I show my fandom to the other fans, but the muggles out there wouldn't recognize it and they would leave me alone, you know?
Right.
So that shifts, you know, now that we're in an age where superhero movies are everything and everybody is a fan of Captain America, wearing your Captain America hoodie is nothing, you know, and it's an easy thing to do and it's available everywhere. So so that shift is one of those many things that kind of killed Think Geek, and has made this industry a lot more diluted, I think. And I'm sorry to use the word diluted because everyone is doing some wonderful things out there, but it makes it harder for those of us small entities who want to do something wonderful from competing against the big box retailers who are doing a great job themselves.
Right.
So, you know, it makes it hard. We have to work that much harder.
Yeah. I think we have another question.
I think this is a pretty good wrap up from Mike Horn. Can you guys speculate on the changing face of retail post-COVID?
Ooh. I might as well try to solve world hunger too while I'm at it.
Yeah.
Let's see. It will be small. I think it's going to start small. I think it will be pockets of here in the States. I'm just going to talk about States, mind you, not globally on a big scale. But I think there are pockets of population which are more avid about getting out there and getting back to a whatever normal life they had before. And I think there are a lot of people who are very hesitant to get out there and have that normal life again because they're just hesitant for a lot of different reasons. And I think it will affect us a lot. I don't think that retail will return to the normal level that it was before. And if it does, it won't be very soon.
Yeah, my wife and I have this conversation a lot, and we don't 100% agree. I mean, I think the natural thought is, like you were saying, is that everyone's going to believe that that retail is on the downward decline, and people are going to be interested in luxury items or entertainment properties or entertainment toys and things like I've collected over the years. They're just not going to be as interested in it because they're worried about getting toilet paper from the grocery store, or the fact that meat is becoming difficult to source now, you know, just hamburgers.
Yeah.
So, but on the flip side of it, I think about two things. My Amazon sales at Amazon.com/thecoop, they're actually doing fine. Yeah, there was a dip at the very beginning of this when everyone was locked in, but then the very next week it went right back up to normal and it stayed there. And I don't know if that's a function of the product mix that I have or the price mix or some combination of thereof, but I think there's still a lot of people who are terrified of the world that we're living in right now and still want some comfort. And spending $20 on a toy is relatively inconsequential, and they're still willing to do that. Are they going to be buying the $300, 1/6 scale maquettes? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But, but so I could be well positioned accidentally in that business, but I'm also thinking about it from the other side of it, where say you're Walmart, and you're trying to source for Q4, and you see everything that's happening, but you also see that Amazon is still doing their thing.
Right.
And if you're Walmart and you're trying to source for product, you're thinking, well, I know Amazon's going to have this stuff because they have this virtual catalog that is inexhaustible. So if I don't have this figure that everyone goes nuts for over here, I'm going to lose a customer to Amazon.
Right.
And so they're still buying, So from a manufacturer to wholesale perspective, I don't see a big change yet. We'll see. But from manufacturer to consumer, again, I'm not seeing a big change, a little change maybe. But again, it could be accidental. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still waiting for it to play out.
I think we're going to have to buckle down on the basics, which is food, clothing, shelter, right? And if we as people who work in this industry and stuff can help enhance those in some fashion, and not, again, being authentic and not being perceived as capitalizing on people's fears or what have you, price gouging, any of those things, then I think there might be a good overlap on those needs. But again, it's going to be an interesting ride. So if anybody else has any speculations, drop it in so we can learn. But I think that's going to kind of bring us to the end of our transmission. Oh,
Really?
wait,
Already?
one more?
Coming.
One more comment. One more comment.
Yeah.
What do you got?
Mike, Mike Capper?
Mike Cap, yeah.
Mike Cap? Just start making healthy, edible collectibles.
You know, that's actually a really good point, because I think that like, to your point, food, clothing, or what is it, food, shelter, and what was the third thing you were saying
Clothing,
about?
yeah, food, clothing,
Yeah,
shelter.
food, clothing, shelter, the things you want to focus on. And I think about, you know, all my stuff. I have a lot of stuff here that I collect over the years, and I've been telling my family, who insists on buying me things for Christmas, I say, just give me something consumable, you know, so I don't fill up my shelves with more stuff. As much as I love it, give me a bottle of wine. I'll drink that, and I enjoy that. You give me an experience.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah,
that's a
collectible.
whole other topic. We're going to put that in a transmission and a whole other topic for
Yeah, out of time.
experiential licensing. So, okay, tell us how we can find you. Tell us what you want us to last know about the Coop and any other details. What's coming up?
Yeah, so the Coop, aka Crowded Coop, we've been in business for 10 years, and you can find us on crowdedcoop.com, on Instagram at Crowded Coop, and Twitter at Crowded Coop, Facebook at Follow the Coop, because someone else got Crowded Coop. But you want to look for our newest stuff. This is my favorite thing right now in the whole wide world. Handmade by robots, collectible figures. These are. It's hard to tell on this little camera, but they look like, and there's just a lot of glare too. But they look like they're knitted amigurumi dolls, but they're vinyl collectibles, and I love them so much. And
Go to the website; they're amazing.
Yeah, go to crowdedcoop.com and check them out, because we've got a lot of them, and you're gonna love them. And we just rolled out our new Psycho Bandit from Borderlands, and it's cool.
So cool. All right, cool. Well, I think that's it. We will see you all hopefully same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Thank you, Nita.
Thank you. Happy Fangirl Friday, and thanks
Bye.
for tuning in, everybody. And thank you, Frazier, for joining me on this.
See you next
Bye.
time.